In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 NHL games happening on March 2nd, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released, so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 NHL games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start. If you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Detroit Red Wings versus Nashville Predators. Detroit walks into Nashville looking like the grown-up version of its own rebuild, sitting at 34-20-6 and right in the middle of a real playoff push. The road trip has been a little humbling, with that rough loss in Carolina where they gave up 5 and only found the net twice, and the last few games have reminded them that style points do not count as much as structure when you are chasing a spot. Nashville, on the other side, is hanging around the Western race at 27-24-7, that classic tweener record where the team feels dangerous one night and maddening the next, but still very much alive. Both groups are playing their third game in 5 days after the break. Both have been living out of suitcases, and now everything funnels into an afternoon puck drop in a loud building that tends to feed off nerves as much as it feeds off energy. The market still leans toward Detroit as the glossier story, a slight road favorite in most minds, but the actual gap between these two in this exact setting is a lot closer to a coin landing on its edge than a coin landing cleanly on one side. Detroit's whole personality this season feels more grown-up than what we have seen in recent years, with their scoring and defending sitting right around league average and their games taking on a more controlled, measured tone instead of pure chaos. They are comfortable squeezing teams, slowing the middle of the ice, and trusting that their high-end skill can cash in when a mistake finally pops up. That kind of patient approach looks beautiful when you are at home with last change and your routine, but on the road, and especially in a building like Nashville's where momentum can flip on one loud shift, it can also tilt into long stretches of defending and hoping your goalie stands tall. John Gibson has been that calming force, quietly stacking quality games, but Detroit has leaned on him a lot against heavy offenses, and that kind of load starts to matter when the miles pile up. Nashville plays with a very different heartbeat, and sometimes it looks messy, but it is the kind of messy that can be very uncomfortable to handle in their home rink. Their season profile screams high event, with plenty of goals going both ways, and while that is not exactly the dream for a coaching staff, it does mean they are not afraid of a broken play, a weird bounce, or a frantic shift when the crowd gets rolling. Saros has had a choppy year by his standards, and the numbers tell that story, but you still see those nights where he slams the door and reminds everyone how good he can be when he feels the game. The blue line, with Roman Josi eating heavy minutes and a big body like Nicholas Hague back in the mix, finally looks closer to the version they imagined, even if it is still a work in progress. Up front, the veteran core with Philip Forsberg, Ryan O'Reilly, and Steven Stamkos knows how to turn an ordinary home date into a statement game, and there is a different kind of urgency for a team trying to cling to its spot in a crowded conference. Detroit is grinding through a demanding swing. Nashville is staring at a stretch where every single point feels like it has weight, and in that kind of spot, the home team with the desperate edge and the building behind it has a very real path to not just hanging inside the number but finishing the job outright. As our first pick for this matchup, the Nashville Predators money line is our full game side pick. Look at Nashville's recent scores in isolation, and it is easy to assume this will be another track meet, the kind of game where every shot feels like it might end up in the back of the net. That impression is loud, but it is also a little misleading, because a lot of those wild nights came when the defensive group was patched together and the team was leaning into chaos more out of necessity than preference. With more familiar faces back on the blue line and the staff clearly trying to pull things back toward a cooler tempo, the intention now leans more toward managing risk than chasing fireworks for 60 minutes straight. Detroit's pattern fits that idea too. Their goals scored and goals allowed sit in that balanced range where nothing looks extreme, and recently their games have skewed toward tighter, quieter scorelines, especially away from home. They still have enough talent to finish their chances when they appear, but the way they play is closer to a patient chess match than to an arcade game. That naturally eats time, limits rush chances, and turns a lot of nights into races to 3 instead of races to 5. Nashville's season totals point to plenty of goals overall, but when you peel back the layers, you see a chunk of that inflation tied to special team swings, meltdown periods, and a handful of outlier games that sit in memory far larger than they sit in the true long-term picture. In a spot like this, with both teams deep into a busy stretch, coaching staffs usually shorten benches, ask for safer puck management through the neutral zone, and lean hard on their starters in net. That kind of approach often turns a matchup that looks explosive on paper into something more controlled in practice, where each mistake feels heavy and both sides are more focused on avoiding the next big error than on chasing an extra goal. The ingredients here point toward a game that can absolutely have its momentum spikes, but one that settles into a more measured rhythm, where a few key chances decide things and the final score lands closer to a modest total than a full-on goal fest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Columbus Blue Jackets versus New York Rangers. Columbus walks into Madison Square Garden looking like the grown-up in the room, while New York still feels like it is figuring itself out. Columbus sits at 29-21-8 in the standings and lives in the top half of the division, and New York sits at 23-29-7 and hangs closer to the bottom. That gap in the table already hints at who has been more reliable over the long haul, and the market has treated Columbus as a small road favorite in spots like this, which says a lot without you even seeing the exact number. Zach Werenski drives so much of what Columbus wants to do, and he leads the team with 65 points from the blue line while staying fully active and healthy on their roster. The nice thing for them is that it is not just a one-man show, because they can send out multiple forward lines and still feel dangerous with Boone Jenner, Adam Fantilli, Kirill Marchenko, and the rest, all firmly listed on the active sheet. The only notable absence on the back end is Brendan Smith, who is on injured reserve with that knee issue and is not expected back until at least early April, so the main defensive core is still in place. That sort of stability might sound boring, but for a long regular season it is gold. New York sits on the other side of the storyline, stuck between wanting to win now and needing to reshape the roster. The front office pulled the plug on the Artemi Panarin era by sending him to Los Angeles, and even though the old ESPN panel still shows him among the Rangers' leaders, he is gone from their lineup and wearing a different sweater. In his place, you get a youth movement that is fun but streaky, with younger players like Gabe Perreault, Noah Laba, Brendan Brisson, and Scott Morrow getting real minutes as the team leans into development and patience. The offense now leans much more on Mika Zibanejad and JT Miller, both firmly on the active roster and carrying a heavy load. That sort of transition phase can produce the occasional big night, but it also invites a lot of uneven stretches, and you see that in their record. Recent form tells the same story in a slightly louder voice. Columbus has taken 3 of its last 5, finding wins over St. Louis, New Jersey, and Chicago, and dropping games at Boston and at home to the Islanders. New York has managed just 1 win in its last 5, that tense shootout against Pittsburgh, wrapped around 4 losses that keep pulling them back down. Even when you strip out the wins and losses and just look at how they play, Columbus keeps generating around 30 shots and a little over 3 goals per game, while New York is stuck closer to the mid-20s in shots and under 3 goals a night. That is not just a stat page thing, it matches the eye test, because one team consistently pushes the pace more and the other often looks like it is chasing the game. Injuries chip away a bit more at New York than at Columbus. The Rangers are missing centers Adam Edstrom and Matt Rempe, both sitting on injured lists with lower body and thumb issues, and neither expected back for this matchup. Those are not headline names to the casual fan, but they matter for depth and for the way the coaching staff wants to roll lines and handle matchups. Columbus does not have that same kind of disruption in the middle of the ice right now, which makes it easier for them to keep their usual rhythm and keep roles clear. Goaltending is the one place where New York fights back in the conversation. Igor Shesterkin has returned from that 13-game absence and looked sharp, turning in strong performances in his first 2 starts back and reminding everyone why he is treated like a star. On the other bench, Columbus leans on Jet Greaves and Elvis Merzlikins, a tandem that may not have the same name recognition, but is fully active and capable of giving them steady enough work to let the skaters decide it. It can sound strange to lean toward the roadside when the home team has the big-name goalie, but hockey pricing often reflects that, because a single elite goalie can keep an underdog live without making them the safer long-term play. Put all of this into one picture, and the pattern is clear. Columbus has the deeper and healthier forward group, a steadier blue line, more consistent 5-on-5 play, and a team profile that fits a serious push rather than a retooling project. New York has energy and talent, but it also has roster churn, uneven recent form, and more things that can go wrong on any given night. Honestly, if you are simply asking which side is more trustworthy to handle the number over 60 minutes, the answer points toward the same sweater again and again. As our first pick for this matchup, the Columbus Blue Jackets money line is our full game side pick. Columbus averages a little over 3 goals scored per game and just over 3 goals allowed, so their typical night lands somewhere around 6 combined. New York sits closer to 2.5 goals scored and a bit over 3 allowed, which pulls that combined expectation down into the mid-5s when you blend these two profiles together. That rough math already puts you below a higher posted number, and that is before you even look at recent game logs. The last 5 Columbus games have landed on 7, 6, 4, 3, and 8 goals, with finals like 4-3 in overtime against the Islanders, 4-2 in Boston, 4-0 against Chicago, 3-0 in New Jersey, and 5-3 in St. Louis. There are a couple of wilder nights in there, but it is hardly a constant track meet. For New York, the last 5 have finished at 3-2 in a shootout win over Pittsburgh, 3-2 in an overtime loss to Philadelphia, 2-0 against Carolina, 6-5 in that chaotic night in Pittsburgh, and 2-1 against the Islanders. 4 of those 5 stay at 5 goals or fewer, and only 1 explodes into a true fire wagon game. That is a pretty strong hint about the usual tone when this team plays right now. Goaltending shapes the scoring environment too. Shesterkin's return and sharp form in those first 2 games back pushes New York games toward tighter margins because he can erase mistakes that would become easy goals against a lesser goalie. On the Columbus side, the combination of Greaves and Merzlikins has been good enough lately that the team does not need to live in high-scoring chaos and can be comfortable in more controlled, lower-event games. It sounds funny, but sometimes 2 capable goalie groups cancel out a lot of offensive ambition for both clubs. There is also that wrinkle with officiating and special teams that keeps nagging at this matchup. Columbus has been vocal about getting only 2 power plays over its last 3 games, feeling like they are not getting rewarded for the pressure they create. Articles have pointed out that trend and framed it as part of a broader officiating pattern this season. Officials are never predictable, so nothing is guaranteed here, but if that kind of whistle pattern even partly holds, fewer power plays usually mean fewer easy goals and more grinding 5-on-5 sequences. Fans love to talk about officiating, but from a scoring angle it often comes down to this simple thing: fewer man advantages tend to pull totals down. The setting adds another layer. Madison Square Garden can get loud and emotional, especially if a game stays tight for long stretches, and that kind of atmosphere often pushes players to tighten up rather than trade chances like a pond hockey game. New York's current style, with a focus on structure and development, leans more into responsible hockey than all-out risk, and Columbus has shown it is very comfortable winning in more controlled, lower-scoring patterns instead of forcing wild comebacks. So you get 2 teams that, for different reasons, are not naturally drawn toward a festival of goals. All of those threads, from season averages to recent scorelines to goaltending form and special teams noise, keep circling back to the same idea. This matchup is more likely to live in that 3-2 or 4-2 type neighborhood than in a 7 or 8 goal shootout. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Philadelphia Flyers versus Toronto Maple Leafs. The Flyers walk into Toronto looking like a group that has figured out exactly who they are and how they want to play. The energy around them feels less like a hopeful wild card flirtation and more like a team that enjoys proving people wrong shift after shift. Under Rick Tocchet, the whole vibe leans towards structure, work rate, and annoying the kind of opponent that prefers a track meet instead of a street fight. It is not flashy, it is not pretty, but it travels extremely well, especially in buildings where the home crowd expects a show and gets a grind instead. Toronto sits on the other side of this matchup, carrying plenty of name recognition and just as much frustration. The star power is still there, the skill is still obvious, yet the story that keeps repeating is how often their games turn into messy, stressful nights in their own zone. You can feel the pressure stacking up on the home side, not just from the standings but from the noise around the team, and that can tighten the hands and the decision-making when the game is still close in the third. On top of that, the loss of a key shutdown defender like Chris Tanev strips away a safety net you really want when you are facing a hard forechecking group that happily finishes every check. The contrast between the two styles is what makes this matchup so interesting. One team leans into details, embraces the ugly wins, and seems comfortable turning every period into a series of small, annoying battles. The other relies on high-end talent but keeps getting dragged into chaotic, off-script hockey that leaves them exposed when the puck turns the wrong way. In a spot like this, with the visitors bringing a clear identity and the hosts searching for a cleaner version of themselves, the team that thrives in discomfort often has the more reliable path to covering. As our first pick for this matchup, the Philadelphia Flyers money line is our full game side pick. People see Toronto on the schedule and immediately picture goals flying in from everywhere, and to be fair, their season has trained everyone to expect wild swings and big numbers. The instinct is to assume fireworks again, especially in a home game where the stars are under the spotlight and there is always that urge to answer critics with offense. Here is the thing, though, this specific pairing has a different feel when you look at how the Flyers prefer to script their nights. Under Tukchit, Philadelphia's comfort zone is a game that looks almost boring on the surface. They slow your rushes, they stack bodies in the middle, they chip pucks out instead of trying something cute at their own blue line. It is the kind of approach that quietly trims the number of clean looks for both teams. You still get chances, sure, but they come from grinding sequences rather than constant odd-man rushes. For anyone who has watched March hockey over the years, it is that familiar playoff-style rhythm where every shot feels earned instead of free. Toronto's recent stretch adds another layer to this. After getting called out for sloppy play and soft details, the message in that room has very likely shifted toward pride on the defensive side, not just scoring their way out of trouble. Coaches in that situation tend to shorten benches a bit, trust smarter decisions over risky ones, and demand that the forwards help the defenders instead of leaving them on an island. Games shaped by that sort of response usually start tighter, with more conservative reads, and even when the talent is elite, it takes a while for things to loosen up. When you line up a visiting team that thrives in low-event hockey against a home team that has been stung enough to finally treat defense like a serious project, you get a recipe that leans toward a controlled pace rather than a full-on track meet. The puck will still find dangerous players, it always does, but the overall shape of the contest points more toward patience, shot suppression, and longer stretches where the neutral zone feels clogged and sticky. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Carolina Hurricanes versus Seattle Kraken. There is one small housekeeping tweak before anything else. The matchup in question, Carolina Hurricanes against Seattle Kraken, is actually scheduled for Monday, March 2, 2026, at Climate Pledge Arena in Seattle, with puck drop set for late evening on the East Coast, not February 3rd, so everything here is built around that specific game slot. Carolina come into this one looking like that team in your beer league that everyone quietly complains about because they just keep winning while pretending it is no big deal. They are riding a 5-game winning streak and a 12-game point streak on this West Coast swing, and they just put 5 past Tampa Bay and another 5 on Detroit before even heading out here. Big picture, their profile is exactly what you expect from a real contender. They are sitting around 3.4 goals scored per game and about 2.8 allowed, so they are comfortably top 6 territory on both sides of the puck, not some lucky mid-table story. They fire roughly 32 shots a night and only give up about 24, and when you are tilting the ice with that kind of shot gap, you do not need a lot of magic bounces to end up on the right side of the score. That is the kind of underlying engine coaching staffs love because it travels well, it survives cold streaks, and it does not really care which rink you are in. Seattle, on the other hand, sit in that scrappy zone, the kind of group that feels dangerous but still has to sweat every result. They are sitting on a record of 28-22-9 with a negative goal differential, which fits a team scoring roughly 2.85 goals a night and giving up around 2.9. That is good enough to hang around the wild card picture, not quite enough to scare anyone on reputation alone. Their scoring is bottom 3rd in the league, the defending is solid but not suffocating, and you get the sense they have to squeeze every drop out of their structure just to keep games inside a 1-goal window. It is a very NHL story, blue-collar, respectable, but a different universe from the way Carolina has been rolling. We already saw how these two styles clashed earlier this season in Raleigh. On January 10th, Carolina won that game 3-2, but the more striking detail was the shot clock. Seattle managed only 12 shots all night while the Hurricanes did their usual territorial steamroll routine. That kind of game feels closer to a basketball team dominating time of possession and offensive rebounds, even when the scoreboard does not fully explode. If you are a coach or a bettor, that is the stuff you hang your hat on because it tells you how repeatable the matchup dynamic might be. Now flip to the setting. Climate Pledge Arena is going to be loud. Seattle crowds are smart, engaged, and they love an underdog tilt. You have the classic West Coast home energy on one side and a road team that has been flying high on the other, plus the travel factor quietly humming in the background. Sometimes that cocktail drags favorites into the mud, but sometimes the better roster, the cleaner structure, and the heavier shot share just shove through it anyway. Here, all those layers keep pulling the same way. The team that controls the puck more, creates more, and concedes less is also the one with current form, and that nudges the likely side toward the visitors when you think about who is more likely to win this by the margin that matters. This matchup breakdown is based on current records, stats, and injuries as of the morning of March 2nd, 2026, and the pick that follows is a projection, not a guaranteed outcome. As our first pick for this matchup, the Carolina Hurricanes money line is our full game side pick. Pyotr Kochetkov is still a Carolina Hurricane in name, but he is out after hip surgery and is expected to miss the rest of the season, so anything involving him here is purely off the board for this specific game. Brandon Bussi is firmly in the Carolina crease conversation on the active roster, carrying a sparkling type of record in the 23-3-1 range with something like a 2.2 goals against average, fresh off a 3-year extension and not sitting on any current injury list. For Seattle, Matt Murray is on the Kraken books in goal but parked on injured reserve with a lower body issue, with a timeline that stretches about 6 weeks and points to an absence through early March, which means you should not expect him in uniform for this one. Ryan Lindgren is a Kraken defenseman, still with Seattle, and labeled as a short-term concern after leaving a February 25th game with an undisclosed issue, so he lands in that day-to-day. Will they or will they not kind of bucket that coaches often do not clarify until very close to puck drop? Everyone mentioned sits with the correct team, and their availability lines up with the latest public information, while any guess about exact starting goalies or final pairings remains just that, a guess, until warm-ups actually happen. Seattle have a reputation as an under-team, and on the surface the numbers nod in that direction, which makes this matchup fun to unpack. Their offense sits in the bottom third of the league at around 2.85 goals per game. Their defense gives up about 2.9 per night, and the whole profile suggests controlled, lower-scoring games rather than track meets. The building itself has hosted a good number of 3-2 or 2-1 kind of nights, and that can stick in your mind if you have watched them grind teams into those smaller scorelines. Carolina complicate that story, and honestly, that is where things start to get interesting. Their recent scorelines have a much louder feel. They beat Tampa Bay 5-4, rolled Detroit 5-2, and have stacked wins with 4 or 5 goals on the board more often than not over the past month. That is what happens when a high-volume attack, roughly 32 shots per game, connects with a power play sitting in the low 20s in terms of conversion rate. You also layer in a goaltending setup that is solid but still living through injuries, with Bussi breaking out but sharing the net with a veteran option who can occasionally have one of those shaky nights. When you put all of that together, you get a team that can score quickly and in bunches, but that still gives a little back the other way. Seattle on defense are not some pushover, yet the cracks show up in a very specific and very costly place. Their penalty kill is sitting at the bottom of the league, hovering around 72%, and that is a problem when a strong power play rolls into your building. If you are giving free looks to a Carolina unit that just lit up Tampa in that 5-4 kind of game, the odds of special teams pushing the scoreboard higher go way up. What complicates the stereotype even more is that, for a so-called low-event team, the Kraken have been living in some surprisingly loud scorelines of their own lately. They handled Washington 5-1, lost 4-1 to Dallas, and took a 5-1 win over Vancouver, so this is not a group locked into nothing but 2-1 games. That recent stretch hints at a team that can both dish out and absorb bigger numbers when the night tilts that way. There is also the memory of that first meeting this season, the 3-2 Carolina win in Raleigh where Seattle managed only 12 shots. Even in a game where the score stayed modest, the underlying story was that Carolina controlled almost everything. Now shift the scene to Seattle, give the Kraken even a small bump in shot volume at home, and keep Carolina playing their aggressive, power play-driven style, and the most likely script starts to look less like a sleepy chess match and more like a night with enough swings, penalties, and momentum shifts to push the total past the posted number. This whole game flow narrative is by definition speculative. It is based on current season scoring rates, special teams trends, and recent scorelines, not on any guaranteed outcome. And as our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Colorado Avalanche versus Los Angeles Kings. Crypto.com Arena at night has a different feel, and this matchup leans right into that mood. Colorado shows up with that heavyweight aura, the kind of team that knows exactly who it is, while Los Angeles is still trying to smooth out the rough edges of a season that has not gone quite how it was drawn up. One side brings the record of a contender, sitting at 39-10-9, cruising at the top of the Central with a huge edge in goal differential. The other side drifts closer to the bubble at 24-21-14, still in the hunt, just not in control. It already feels like a clash of certainty versus uncertainty, and that matters when you think about who is more likely to handle pressure in a tight game. Colorado has been running through opponents in a very modern way. They score at a high clip, around 3.8 goals per game, and yet they also sit at the top in goals against at about 2.4, which is a ridiculous balance for a regular season grind. And the strange twist is that they do all this while living with a power play that sits at the bottom of the league near 14.8%. So instead of relying on whistles and set plays, they lean into skating, pace, and clean 5-on-5 hockey, which is not only efficient but also pretty demoralizing for teams that need special teams just to keep up. Honestly, that kind of profile travels well because effort and structure on even strength do not vanish just because the building is loud and the crowd is restless. The core pieces for Colorado are in place and ready, which is a big part of why their style works so consistently. Nathan MacKinnon, Martin Necas, Gabriel Landeskog, Valeri Nichushkin, and Cale Makar all sit in their usual spots at the top of the lineup, and that kind of continuity lets them play the same script every night. Logan O'Connor remains out with his hip issue, and Joel Kiviranta is in concussion protocol and listed day-to-day, but those are more depth hits than identity hits. They are fresh off a 3-1 win over Chicago from Friday, and now they open this California swing with the Kings before moving on to the Ducks. That is a classic spot where an elite team tries to treat the trip like a business road run, handle Game 1, and then roll the momentum into Game 2. The Kings feel very different. They still lean on structure and goaltending, but the team as a whole is in a kind of remodel phase that you can feel in the way they play. DJ Smith is now the coach after Jim Hiller was removed, which already tells you they were not happy with the direction. Artemi Panarin has been brought in through a trade to juice the offense, which is a bold move that screams, we need more spark, right now. Kevin Fiala is out long-term after a leg fracture at the Olympics and sits on injured reserve, while Andrei Kuzmenko is also on injured reserve with a knee issue. So the roster has talent, but some of the natural scoring punch is locked in the trainer's room instead of on the ice. Panarin, Anze Kopitar, Adrian Kempe, Quinton Byfield, and Brandt Clark are all active and slotted into the top lines and power play units, so there is still quality up and down the sheet. Drew Doughty and Joel Armia are both listed as day-to-day, and their status hangs a little over the defensive plan and forward depth. It is not chaos, but it is not stable either. That half-in, half-out feeling can make a team hard to trust for a full 60 minutes, especially against a polished opponent that knows exactly how it wants to play. Stylistically, Los Angeles has turned into a low-ceiling but steady-floor type of team. They sit near the bottom of the league in goals per game at 2.5, but they still hang inside the top group defensively at around 2.9 against, which gives them a modest negative goal differential around -20. Their power play floats in the mid-teens in terms of percentage. Not awful, not scary. Their recent game logs tell the same story as the numbers. They have scored 2, 1, 4, 1, and 2 in their last 5, with only one of those games flashing anything that looks like a breakout. They keep things close, they grind, and then they either hang on or fade late when they cannot keep pace with a more dangerous attack. Colorado, on the other side, tilts the ice by sheer volume. They regularly outshoot opponents by a big margin, around 34 shots for versus 27 against per night, which is basically a full extra line of chances. The Kings hover in the high 20s both ways, which fits the look of a home underdog trying to stay on the ropes long enough for a counterpunch. Here is the thing that works against teams that are sloppy or tired or lost. It rarely works against a team that shows up with a clear plan and the talent to execute it every single shift. Projecting motivation is always a little tricky, but it matters when you frame the likely side. Colorado is chasing hardware, sitting near the top of the league, and they are beginning a short swing through California that sets up nicely if they start strong. Los Angeles is fighting to stay in the playoff race and to settle into its updated identity, which is commendable, but also a lot to juggle when you are facing a juggernaut. When you put all of that together, from health, form, and style, the matchup reads like a spot where the more complete, more stable team is simply more likely to control the night, even in a tricky building and even against a desperate opponent. As our first pick for this matchup, the Colorado Avalanche money line is our full game side pick. Colorado has that reputation as a track meet machine, the kind of team that turns every night into a skating contest, but the deeper metrics suggest something quieter. Across the season, these two teams together sit around 6.3 combined goals per game, with Colorado at 3.8 and Los Angeles at 2.5. That is not a bad output at all, but it is softer than what the public image of a fireworks show would suggest. Their defensive work matters just as much. Their opponents together manage about 5.3 goals per game against them, with Colorado holding to around 2.4 per night and the Kings around 2.9. So even though there is offensive skill on both sides, the baseline game flow leans toward controlled hockey rather than wild chaos. Honestly, that tension is what makes this total interesting, because you feel like it should explode, but the evidence gently taps the brakes. If you look at raw totals, Avalanche games have cleared the higher scoring mark in only a portion of their schedule, hitting 7 or more goals in 26 of their contests. With their 39-10-9 record, that leaves more than half of their games landing on 6 or fewer. Kings games tilt even more in that restrained direction, with only 20 of their 59 outings climbing to that same higher scoring range. That is roughly a third of their season. Not exactly a nightly fireworks show. Special teams are supposed to be the shortcut to higher scores, but they do not look like that here. Colorado's power play, despite all that talent, sits at the bottom of the league at about 14.8%. Los Angeles is sitting in the mid-teens and near the bottom 5 as well. So you lose a lot of those moments where one whistle, one penalty, and suddenly a game that looked sleepy becomes a 5-goal second period. Instead, you get more even strength grind, more clear sight shots for the goalies, and fewer scramble plays around the crease. Health and lineup shape also tilt this total in a specific direction. For Colorado, the confirmed absences up front are Logan O'Connor with his long-term hip issue and Joel Kiviranta in concussion protocol as a day-to-day piece. The scoring core, though, is intact and ready. On the Kings side, you have real offensive talent sitting out. Kevin Fiala is on injured reserve after that Olympic leg injury and is not expected back soon, and Andrei Kuzmenko is on injured reserve with a knee issue as well. Those are not minor losses. Those are the kind of players who can turn a quiet game into a wild one with one shift. Drew Doughty and Joel Armia sit in the day-to-day bucket. If Doughty misses, you could argue that the defensive structure takes a hit, which might open things up a little. But that is still a theoretical bump rather than something you can treat as a guarantee. The uncertainty is real. The impact is less so until you see who actually steps onto the ice. The crease picture fits the lower scoring outlook too. Mackenzie Blackwood and Scott Wedgwood form the tandem for Colorado, and Darcy Quemper with Anton Forsberg cover things for Los Angeles, all active regulars who play inside those strong team defensive numbers. None of them need a heroic night to keep a game in check. They just need the team in front of them to play the system that has worked all season. Colorado also starts a back-to-back here, which matters for how they might choose to manage energy. Instead of trading rushes for a full 60 minutes and turning the game into a pond hockey session, it is very reasonable to expect a more measured pace that focuses on controlling the game, rolling 4 lines, and not emptying the tank. Especially when the opponent, the Kings, have been stuck in a scoring rut and have only cracked 4 goals once in their last 5 games. Put that together, and the picture that comes out looks a lot more like a 3-2 or steady 4-2 type of night than a wild 5-3 or 7-5 track meet. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.